Hello, Command229 here, another Topic of the Week video. Halloween month continues with another Resident Evil topic. I gave Resident Evil 5 a rewrite treatment, so let's give Resident Evil 6 the same. This topic was submitted by Angel89, and her topic is, how would you rewrite Resident Evil 6? Now to start off, I want to make it clear what the timeline of these games are. The time skips between games is not going to be nearly as significant as the ones between the games as they are. The numbered sequels of Resident Evil now all have huge time skips between them. I'm pretty sure this is done to keep them up to date with the current year, but this does have the bad consequence of aging up the cast really quickly. To alleviate this, I'm not going to have major time skips between the main games. After Resident Evil 4, the games will only have 1, maybe 2 year time skips between them. So Resident Evil 6 will only take place a couple of years after Resident Evil 4. Another important thing I want to talk about is that there is one singular main protagonist. There will be multiple campaigns like there are in Resident Evil 6 the game, but there is going to be one primary protagonist that gets focused on. Sherry Birkin.
Sherry Birkin, National Security.
Now, Chris and Jill, Leon and Claire will all be in the game, but the main campaign belongs to Sherry, and Sherry alone. It's not going to be a co-op campaign. Sherry will be the sole playable protagonist of the main campaign. Leon and Claire will have their own side campaign, and Chris and Jill will have their own side campaign, but they're going to be much more akin to separate ways in how they're structured, in that they're side stories that help flesh out things that are going on in the main campaign, where Chris and Jill do their own thing in the BSAA while Leon and Claire are doing things on their own, and all of them will cross over and converge at different points. But it's not required that you have to play the side campaigns to know what's going on in the main story. Ada will also have her own side campaign, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. The story of this will share a lot of story elements to the Resident Evil 6 game, but there's going to be a lot of differences and different context for them. Simmons and Carla will still be the main villains of the game, and Carla will still be turned into an Ada doppelganger, but the reasons for this are going to be very different. Simmons is a member of the organization, the same group that Ada works for. He's given her numerous orders over the years, and became obsessed with her. Not because Simmons got friend-zoned by her, but because she was just such a good agent. She always completed her mission, she always survived, she always came through for them, and was even able to play games with Wesker, of all people. That's impressive! But the one problem with Ada is that her allegiance cannot be guaranteed. Sure, she's worked for them for years, but could they always rely on Ada to always be on their side? Especially seeing how sometimes she will go off script for people like Leon. So Simmons wanted to create more Adas, a whole group of Adas, an army of Adas. All of them would have the same skills and abilities as the original, but with absolute guaranteed loyalty. To do this, he went behind the backs of the top brass of the organization and started his own experiments in a secret lab in China. He kidnapped a bunch of women and started experimenting on them, trying to turn them into Ada. And of course it just kept failing over and over, no matter what procedure they used, no matter what viruses that they used to change their bodies, nothing worked properly. No matter what means they used, all of these women kept dying, in some cases just outright deformed. It wasn't until Simmons used his assistant Carla as the test subject where they actually made any real progress. She came out looking and being able to fight like Ada. Unfortunately, this severely shortened her life, leaving her with only a few years left to live. She resented him for this. She hated Simmons. I mean, sure, she was fine with the experimentations, but when it was her, it ruined her life? Oh no, she took this personally. So she broke out. She turned on Simmons. She decided, if I'm going to die some horrible, painful death, then I'm taking the world down with me. Stealing a virus that the organization had on hand, the C virus, she planned to destroy the world and just kill everyone, take the world down with her, just to get her revenge on Simmons. After discovering what Carla was doing, Simmons realized, crap, I need to clean this up. Simmons isn't just a member of the organization. He also holds a significant position in the United States government, being over the agency that Leon and Sherry work in. So using his positions in the organization and in the government, he tries to fix the problem that he ended up causing. He tries to get Ada out of the way, but this being Ada, she's not just going to sit put when a whole bunch of crap is going down. And he tries to use the BSAA and Leon and Sherry to eliminate Carla, making it sound like this is all about Ada, but trying to keep the actual Ada out of the way. Of course, her involvement is a given, considering this is Ada Wong we're talking about, so that just complicates things further. Sherry's also given a mission. She needs to find a man named Jake Mueller, someone who has an immunity to the C virus. She doesn't know exactly everything that's going on, but it's her mission to find him, bring him back so that they can synthesize an antidote to the C virus. So this is where all the storylines start. Each one of them will be happening simultaneously while the main storyline with Sherry is going on. Now at this point, Sherry is in her early 20s, around the same age that Leon was back in Resident Evil 2. She joined the same agency that Leon works in, with him acting as a mentor to her. He's run several missions with her as sort of the lead, and this mission is going to be Sherry's first solo mission. When Leon gets orders to eliminate Ada, he's like, something's going on here. Now, Leon was already on a mission taking care of some minor terrorists in sort of a cold opening for him, where he meets up with Claire and TerraSave, because TerraSave was also in the area trying to sort of help clean up some stuff that was going on. So this is where he is when he gets those orders. Claire, being there, decides to team up with him to figure out what exactly is going on after the TerraSave base is attacked by zombies. So this is also going to have a couple nice cameos. It's going to show that Rebecca Chambers actually joined TerraSave as a doctor who tries to help find cures for different viruses and use her medical knowledge to help out people who have suffered from crap going on because of bioterrorism. Another TerraSave member that's an interesting cameo is a slightly older Ashley Graham. A few years older and graduated from college, she was inspired by Leon to actually do something about the crap that goes on in the world. So she decided to join TerraSave, introduced to her by Leon through Claire, where Claire ends up becoming a mentor to Ashley. Of course, she's not doing suplexes and kicking butt, but she is doing stuff to actually help out, so she'll be helping evacuate some people there. Now, it's not a big role, but it's a little something to show that Ashley's grown up, she's become more responsible, and she's doing something to help people. So after Leon and Claire finished cleaning up the mess that was going on, then they decided to do their own investigation into Simmons' orders and what was going on with Ada, realizing that there's definitely something else going on here. Chris and Jill also get orders, being top agents in the BSAA, to eliminate Ada Wong. Now Chris and Jill know a bit about Ada through Leon and realize, okay, this seems a little weird that the spy that was always in the shadows is now some sort of mass murdering terrorists. So they decide to find Ada and try to figure out what is going on. I'm sure there's a lingering question of what about characters like Piers and Helena from Resident Evil 6? Am I going to include them? Yes, I am, but in a slightly different capacity. Now, Jake is still going to be in the story as mentioned before, but he's going to be an NPC character, not someone that you play as, considering that Sherry's campaign is single player. He's a character that Sherry teams up with in parts, who travels with her in times and then is gone others. Piers is still in the game and acts as a supporting character for Chris and Jill. Running his own team of BSAA soldiers, they support Chris and Jill throughout the game. Obviously not as big as a role as he had in Resident Evil 6, but he's still an important character who helps Chris and Jill out. Helena's role in the story is almost identical to her actual game counterpart. The main difference being that instead of Simmons forcing her into helping him, it's actually Carla who does it. Carla kidnaps Helena's sister and forces Helena to release the C virus in places, not to kill the president, but to cause havoc, kill people, and to implicate the United States government to cause more trouble. Similar things will happen, like Helena's sister being experimented on and dying, and she still helps Leon using the information that she has in order to help him find out what's really going on. As with Piers and Jake, not as big of a role in the story as it is in the actual main game, but she's still a very important supporting character and is very important to the plot. She wants to help clean up the mess she contributed to making because she feels absolutely guilty. Even if her sister was in danger, she feels terribly guilty about what she did and the deaths that are on her hands. Something to note about these campaigns: Sherry's will be single player, Leon and Claire's will be co-op, as will Chris and Jill's. Ada's campaign will also be single player, so that you have a mix of the two different styles, so it's not like, oh well, everything's co-op. Ada's campaign will be about her trying to figure out what's really going on, who this doppelganger of her is, and what the hell is Simmons doing. To add to the complications in the story, Carla is actually framing Ada for all of her actions, meaning that Ada has some heat on her. Heat that she does not want, which of course fuels her desire to find out what the hell is going on. Now, Ada will get a little bit of help from a character we haven't seen in a while, Carlos. After the fall of Umbrella, he basically just did mercenary work for whoever would hire him. Due to the large variety of employers he's had, he's got a lot of connections and is able to get a lot of information. So Ada sometimes uses him as an information broker. I'm sure you're noticing a bit of a theme here. I want to bring back a lot of characters. Ada says in Resident Evil 6 that it's like a Raccoon City reunion, except there's a lot of characters who are in Raccoon City that aren't in the game, like Jill and Claire.
Sounds bad.
So I wanted to have representation of pretty much all of the main games. I wanted this game to actually be a reunion, so you have a bunch of characters coming back and references made to pretty much all of the main games. 0, 1, 2, 3, Code Veronica 4, and 5. Even if it's only a bit of a cameo, you will get something from all of these games. So in Sherry's story, her role is to find Jake Mueller so they can develop an antidote to the C virus. She of course has to go on her own adventure to find him and to escort him back. Of course, this isn't nearly as simple, especially when she starts finding out that the person that's giving her orders, Simmons, has an ulterior motive. Now, another detail in this is that Sherry still has the ability to heal like she does in the game, and it's for the same reasons. This would actually manifest in Sherry's ability in-game to recover some health that she's lost. Of course, she can't just recover everything. She would still need to use herbs to heal, but I think it's something interesting to set Sherry apart from all the other playable characters in the game. Sherry will meet up with Claire and Leon and Chris and Jill, and you sort of expand a lot of the stuff that was going on with her over the course of the years leading up to Resident Evil 6. That Leon and Claire, after the events of Raccoon City, were very much like parental figures to her, and inspired her to actually go on and do stuff. So she ended up following in Leon's footsteps, and worked in the same agency that he does, where he mentored her, helped teach her, and watched out for her to make sure that the US government wasn't using her and taking advantage of her. So not only will we have scenes of Sherry discussing things that happened in Raccoon City, we'll also have scenes of her teaming up with Leon and Claire to fight, with Sherry now being older and able to stand alongside Claire and Leon instead of just being protected by them. Now, another complication to add to all of their stories going on is the involvement of Albert Wesker. As I discussed in my video on Resident Evil 5, the Wesker that died in that game was a clone. The real one is still running about. And during Sherry's campaign, Wesker will find Jake to, of course, get a blood sample on him for research purposes after a short fight, a very short fight that Jake had no chance of winning, and a brief scuffle with Sherry, where Wesker takes a blood sample from Sherry because he's fascinated by her ability to heal because of the G virus inside of her. So after a scuffle with Sherry and Jake, Wesker leaves them alive, for Sherry, in small part, to some respect for William Birkin, a man who was responsible for Wesker even having these powers and surviving the first game in the first place, and a man who he spent years working alongside, but also because both of them are far more valuable left alive to stop Carla and Simmons, because Wesker doesn't want the world destroyed. He doesn't want everything infected just willy-nilly like what Carla is doing, so he finds them far more useful to be used to fight against Carla, in one of the few moments where Wesker's goals are actually in line with the heroes. Not because he wants to actually help the heroes, but mostly the fact that he can't let Carla get away with what she's doing. Of course, while Wesker left Sherry alive, that doesn't mean he's not going to stop her if she interferes with his plans, but it's just a moment where you actually get to see that Wesker is capable of being more than just a cruel psychopath. Now, this is the game where we're going to get a lot more explanation and payoff for things that I set up in my version of Resident Evil 5. You find out more about the clone that Chris, Jill, and Barry killed. You also learn more about Jake and his origins, and you're also properly introduced to Alex Wesker. Now, while I did note my hatred for Alex Wesker in my previous video, I'm gonna have to credit Angel89 with some of these ideas, because she took some of my ideas that I had and expanded on them, and she really made the idea of Alex Wesker work. I did end up coming up with an idea after I made my Resident Evil 5 video, where Alex Wesker appears with Wesker at the very end of the game, in the scene that shows that he's actually survived and the one that died was a clone, hinting at her involvement in future games. Now, the Wesker clone in Resident Evil 5, Jake Mueller, and Alex Wesker are all members of the Wesker Children. In this, a project that Albert Wesker started himself. Wesker showed himself to Oswald Spencer after the events of Code Veronica, and proposed an idea. Playing off of Oswald Spencer's huge ego and his ideas of becoming a god, Wesker showed his powers and said, "I could make you like this, I can make you more powerful," and he had Spencer eating out of the palm of his hands. Wesker used the resources that Spencer had in order to make a whole bunch of clones of himself, for a variety of reasons, all serving him. To test out various viruses' effects on him, to see if he'll survive them, to see if they're detrimental, to see if they would enhance him, to run different experiments and seeing how his genetic code would affect things, and just running a whole bunch of different crazy experiments. All, of course, using Spencer's resources. Now, Jake was made to test the effects of a virus that would eventually become known as the C virus on Wesker and see how it would affect him. Now, Jake was made to grow up a little bit faster than normal, which explains why he looks like an adult in his 20s when he's only around 10 years old. Being tested on as a baby, he showed signs of resistance to the C virus and, after being experimented on, developed a full immunity to it, amongst a host of other different viruses. Now, a member of the research team that was working for Spencer saw this and just felt disgusted. She decided that this is wrong. Now, she couldn't free all of them because, well, they were under Wesker and Spencer's watchful eye. So she decided to take one of these children and help him escape. So she took this baby, ran off into Europe, and hid. She named him Jake and raised him as her own son, not telling him anything about the truth or anything related to his origins, making him believe that he was just a normal guy. Now, of course, Jake didn't end up living a normal life, becoming a mercenary to support his mother, using his enhanced abilities, and becoming known for fighting against BOWs and being really good at it, which is why he was hired by the militia that Sheva was in Resident Evil 5. Now, the organization actually knew about Jake, where he was, and did everything possible to keep Wesker away from him. But of course, when Sherry was sent after him, Wesker ended up picking up on this, finding out about one of his clones that had escaped, and so he starts tracking him down so that he can, at the very least, get a blood sample from him for research purposes. And this is how Wesker gets involved in the plot. Now, Alex Wesker is a very different story. She's a special clone that Wesker made. Not to be experimented on, but to be an experiment in and of herself. She's not just a gender bend of Wesker. She's actually a clone of Wesker mixed with DNA from Alexia Ashford.
Alexia?
Which Wesker got during the events of Code Veronica. This is why she's named Alex Wesker, after Alexia. Alex Wesker was grown to adulthood very quickly before her aging was slowed down to normal so that she can serve to help Wesker. Now the thing is, she's absolutely loyal to Wesker. She knows what she is, she knows why she was created, and she doesn't have a problem with that. In fact, she sees it as an honor to have the amazing genetics of Albert Wesker and Alexia Ashford. She's happy to help Wesker in his plans, and Wesker respects her as almost an equal. Of course, the only one he would consider a true equal is someone who has his own genetic code. Go figure. So Alex Wesker becomes Albert Wesker's sort of sister, and becomes his partner in crime. There's no backstabbings between them, though of course they would be ready in case there ever was, and the two Weskers just genuinely work together. It's going to be a weird change of pace, because Alex Wesker is one of the few people that Wesker doesn't betray. She has no intentions of turning on him. She's loyal, she's extremely helpful and intelligent, so why would he? So this ends up setting an interesting parallel to the Ashford twins, where one is deeply loyal to the other, though Alex Wesker isn't nearly as pathetic as Alfred Ashford was to Alexia Ashford. Alex Wesker is far more dignified in her loyalty to Wesker. But this also provides an interesting parallel to Chris and Claire. You have one of the original main characters and his sister, who both deeply care about each other, and then you have the main villain and his, quote, sister, and while they may not share the same familial love for each other that Chris and Claire have, they are, in a way, loyal to each other, trust each other, and work together. By virtue of being a clone of Albert Wesker, Alex Wesker does have some superhuman abilities. Not as much as Wesker himself, but more than someone like Jake has. So she's fully capable of fighting if she has to, though she won't be pulling off nearly the crazy stunts that Wesker does. Obviously, fighting both of them at the same time would be a terrible idea. So Alex Wesker does serve in a supporting role to Wesker in the plot, interacting with some characters, starting a bit of a rivalry with Claire, which I would go on to eventually expand into a better version of Revelations 2, where Alex Wesker fighting Claire Redfield is a lot more fitting. Now, some of my favorite interactions with Alex actually involve her meeting Jake. Now, she knows who he is and what he is, and would even mockingly refer to him as little brother, because technically they are related, genetically, both of them being clones. So Alex Wesker ends up becoming an interesting villain, someone who works with Wesker a lot, and makes his operation a little bit more efficient when you have two Weskers working for the same goals. Like I mentioned before, there will be a lot of crossovers between these different campaigns. You'll have basically all the characters interact with each other at one point or another, and ultimately there will be a point in the story where basically all of the main characters come together and fight side by side, being a true reunion and a celebration of the history of Resident Evil. Now, another thing to talk about is the relationship between Sherry and Jake. I like the idea of them having a friendship. I do not like the idea of them being set up as romantic partners. You have Sherry Birkin, the daughter of William Birkin, who worked alongside Albert Wesker for years. Then you have Jake, who's the clone and quote-unquote son of Wesker. Them being friends is just so interesting. Sherry and Jake end up becoming a heroic echo of William Birkin and Albert Wesker. I like the idea of them being friends. I like the idea of them, talking about a lot of these personal things together. Them finding out about the history of, Sherry's father and Jake's quote-unquote father. So over the course of the story, this friendship develops, not into a romantic relationship at all. None of that. They just end up becoming friends. Now, as the story goes on, instead of bringing Jake to Simmons, as he ordered Sherry to do, she actually gives him to the BSAA to bring him to Terra Save so that Rebecca Chambers can develop a cure for the C virus using his blood. And of course, due to the interactions with the BSAA, Jake meets Chris again, only this time we actually find out the truth of his origins, which of course makes things a little weird with some people in the BSAA, like Chris and Jill and Barry. But there's no big angsty confrontation, it's just an acknowledgement of who Jake really is, being a clone of Wesker, and of course, Chris and Jill and Barry aren't going to hold that against him. I mean, obviously, sins of the father don't translate into being sins of the son. So, Jake hasn't done anything to warrant any ire from Chris, Jill, and Barry. So they end up having a nice interaction. Now, an idea that Angerin had was that at the end of my version of Resident Evil 5, Chris would actually invite Sheva to join the BSAA. Now, in the story, she ends up rejecting it at first, wanting to stay and help rebuild after all the crap that went down in Resident Evil 5. Now, in my rewrite of Resident Evil 5, there would have been a similar moment to the end of the Jake and Sherry campaign in Resident Evil 6, where Jake actually lowers the prices that he was charging Sheva's militia to much lower than what he was initially asking, because he knew that they're going to need a lot of the money to help rebuild it. So he still got paid, but much lower than what he was initially going to charge them. Jake was influenced, seeing Sheva's genuine desire to fight for her homeland against all the crap that was going on there and against Wesker, and felt bad about charging them such an exorbitant fee, so he decided to cut back on that. So by the time of Resident Evil 6, Sheva has just recently joined the BSAA and helps Jake out in getting him to TerraSave to sort of repay the favor that he gave of being such an incredible help fighting against the BOWs back in Africa. This is also part of the reunion idea of the game, where you have characters from all the main games coming back. And I do think it's a shame that Sheva didn't appear after Resident Evil 5 and just kind of became forgotten. So I wanted to have her come back and actually do stuff, even if it's in a bit of a smaller role. So ultimately, Carla is killed, the final blow being struck by Ada herself, getting this stupid doppelganger once and for all. The cure that Rebecca has synthesized is sent out, and they end up doing as best as they can to cure the C-virus and clean up the mess that Carla made. Simmons is cornered and taken in, being tempted to inject himself with a virus, but realizing what that entails, decides that it's better just to let yourself get arrested. Now, the organization finds out what Simmons had done and all the crap that he was doing behind the scenes because Ada found out and reported it to them, so they of course can't let someone as high-ranking as Simmons be taken in lest any of the secrets of the organization get leaked out, so he's assassinated. This leaves some questions for the main characters unanswered, but of course ties up loose ends for the organization, though Ada was nice enough to give Leon the Cliff Notes versions of what had happened so that they're not completely left in the dark. Of course, it was off the books, and Ada never officially told him anything before she disappears into the night again. So in the end, you have Leon, Claire, Sherry, Jake, Chris, Jill, and several of their supporting characters wrapping things up and flying off into the sunset, as is Resident Evil tradition. Plot lines like what happens with Helena will get wrapped up, things that were going on with Piers and the rest of the BSAA will get wrapped up. All of the main plot lines will be wrapped up, with a few hanging threads like what Wesker and Alex are doing, left open to be picked up in another game. And I think that's about it. Now, I don't have the entire story totally fleshed out, much like my rewrite ideas for Resident Evil 5, but I had a lot of ideas because there's so many good ideas in Resident Evil 6 that are just marred by terrible execution and bad writing. And there's some potential. There's potential in there, especially with Sherry, which is why I made her the main character, because if you're going to bring Sherry back, don't drown it out with Leon and Chris. That's why I wanted to make Sherry the main new character. Like, this is Sherry's big return, not just to the series, but as a playable character. And I want that to be the big deal, so that's the main storyline. So, yeah, I think that's about it for this topic. If you want to submit a topic to me, you can comment below if you're on YouTube, or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask about topic : and then whatever topic you want me to talk about, just make sure to follow the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. So if you have any thoughts on my rewrite ideas of Resident Evil 6, or if you have some of your own, please comment below. And thank you for watching.